Operation Lockstep is in full swing, ladies and gentlemen, with more and more countries approving digital ID. We recently warned the UK was on the cusp of imposing digital ID, and within mere days, Keir Starmer announced that it would be mandatory and that no one would be able to work without one. Australia passed digital ID legislation in December of 2024, initially telling everyone it would be voluntary. But within months, Australians will not be able to even perform a Google search without age verification. Now, Switzerland has joined the growing list of countries imposing this on their citizens, although, of course, it's voluntary at first, just like it was in Australia. Unless you're the UK, where they just ram it down your throats and say, you can't work without one off the bat. Nonetheless, we'll take you through this article from the BBC. Swiss voters narrowly approved plan for electronic ID cards. It says, Swiss voters have narrowly approved a plan to introduce voluntary electronic identity cards. With all votes counted, over 50% of those who voted yes to the proposal, while 49.6% rejected it. The closeness of the ballot is a surprise. Opinion polls had suggested up to 60% backed digital IDs, which also had the approval of the Swiss government and both houses of parliament. It was Switzerland's second vote on digital IDs. An earlier proposal was rejected in 2021 amid concerns that the data would be held centrally and controlled largely by private providers. So this is how they've overcome that hurdle of not enough people consenting to this. It says that Sunday's revised proposal keeps the system in government hands. Just a reminder that it's very easy to promise that initially and then go and amend that later, which is what they always do. Data will be stored only on the smartphones of individual users, and digital IDs will be optional, as if the data on our smartphones only belongs to us. Citizens can continue to use national identity card if they choose, which has been standard for decades in Switzerland. So this is how they always sell it, again, barring the example of the UK, whose dictatorial dystopia knows no bounds. It's important to see the example of Switzerland and how this never just happens overnight. The first proposal gets rejected by the people, so they get their buy-in by assuring them about how they care about citizens' privacy and control of their data, and that this is going to be voluntary, we promise. As if every single government isn't operating in line with big tech, who has complete control over our smartphones. There's absolutely no such thing as encrypted anything on a device that comes from big tech. And it's equally important to see what happened in Australia. Assurance after assurance that this was voluntary and for your convenience. And then, oops, come the end of the next year, you can't even search the internet without verifying your age. Which they tell us is different, of course, to a mandatory digital ID. It's just semantics, ladies and gentlemen. It's the same thing. The goal here is exactly what the World Economic Forum says, that you cannot participate in any way at all in society unless you have a digital ID. And governments are thinking of extremely creative ways to get us all there, but the goal is the same. Here is the page on digital ID from the World Economic Forum themselves. They say that digital ID is linked to the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's linked to trade and investment. It's linked to innovation, the digital economy, global health, meaning they can't achieve health worldwide unless everyone has a digital ID, ladies and gentlemen. It's linked to Africa, digital inclusion and opportunity, gender inequality, human rights, meaning we can't assure everyone has human rights without one. Civic participation, meaning you can't participate in society without it. And it goes on and on. Lily Tang Williams is sounding the alarm, and she knows better than anyone, having come from China. She says digital ID was the first step China took. It's the foundation of their social credit system now adopted by the West. It is a surveillance state where one quote-unquote mistake can cost you your job, bank account, your family, and your freedom. Reject it totally. Let's watch this clip she posted.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
It's a matter of principle. Those people have to be condemned.
Those people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price.
It's only right to pay your debts. You have to blacklist those that don't.
The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens, those whose ratings have dropped to zero. On it are companies, but also 23 million people to date. Among them is this journalist Liu Hu. He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members. After being sued for defamation by the subject of a story he'd written, he was blacklisted. But he only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket and was told he was banned from traveling.
That tells me I'm still on the blacklist.
Punished because he's been branded untrustworthy by the state.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
Liu Hu is among a tiny minority of people who have dared to criticize the system, which some are calling a digital dictatorship.
I worry, because I think many people like me will be deprived of individual freedoms.
Now, while the West might not be displaying naughty people on billboards, the West has Palantir, the growing global surveillance technology that is extremely prevalent in the US, largely thanks to its acceleration under the current administration. Just the other day, Governor Ron DeSantis tweeted, if digital ID is pushed in the US, it will run into a brick wall in Florida. I've retweeted that and said, except that Florida already has Real ID and enacted House Bill 3, which I'll explain to you in a moment, which is the beginnings of digital ID. Meanwhile, COSA has already passed the Senate, not the House, and COSA is exactly what they did in Australia, which now has resulted in adults needing age verification to use Google. So to elaborate on this, in 2024, Florida House Bill 3, or HB3, was signed into law to regulate social media and websites that host material harmful to minors. The law, officially titled the Online Protections for Minors Act, bans social media accounts for children under 14 and requires parental consent for 14 and 15-year-olds. Though initially planned to take effect in January of this year, a federal judge temporarily blocked key parts of the law, citing First Amendment concerns. And apart from First Amendment concerns, the point here is that if you need parental consent for a child to use social media, then that parent has to verify their age, either through a digital ID or supplying their government-issued ID, which eventually becomes digital ID, or through age verification software, another form of digital ID. It's all the same thing. COSA, or the Kids Online Safety Act legislation, which was heavily supported by Elon Musk, is a bipartisan federal bill that also requires online platforms to, quote, implement tools and safeguards to protect users and visitors under the age of 17. How will they do that? Well, they can explain it in any way that they want, but in practice, the only way to protect a user based on their age is to verify the age of the user. And that means all users, all persons who use the internet and social media of all ages. People don't generally pay attention to an issue until it's too late. We were reporting on the dangers of COSA in the United States long before it passed the Senate, drawing comparisons to what was happening in Australia at the time. We're sounding the alarm bells again because we're seeing comparisons in the US, albeit in the early stages, but later than most people think. Operation Lockstep for digital ID is in full swing. People must be aware and oppose this with everything they have, or we will end up with a worldwide social credit system operated by shadowy surveillance companies that make our lives impossible to live unless we submit to everything they want to do to us. And make no mistake, that everything includes expiring currency, imposing food choices on us, punishing us for our speech, limiting our travel, and much more, eventually all controlled by AI. We cannot allow this.